Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Hoya Cross Edges tips video. So today I'm going to be talking about a trick that I've already covered before in a previous tips video, but I didn't go too much in depth into, and there are quite a few expansions and further applications of this trick that I think is really useful to know. So I'm going to be talking about those today. So the basic trick is for this case where you have your midge solved and you have the two wings misoriented both in the same slot in the U layer like this. Now, at first, you might think, oh, well, this is quite a nice case. You just insert one and then insert the other. And yeah, that is all right, but it's 8 moves long and it switches between lefty moves and righty moves, and that's not ideal. But this case is much nicer when you find out that it's actually a 4-mover. And the way to do that is R wide prime, F2, R wide, F2. Now, this case is symmetrical, so it works exactly the same on the left. You can just do L wide, F2, L wide prime, F2. And just quickly, before I go over anything else, it's important to be able to double flick with both your left hand and your right hand for this case, because obviously there are two F2s, so you don't want to be doing them either with the same hand, or you don't want to be doing single flicks like that. So if you notice in this execution, starting with my left thumb on the bottom, I'll do the wide R prime first, and then F2 with my right hand, and then the wide R, and then the second F2 with my left hand, like that. And that's how I think you should do this. Now, the inverse of this case is also really useful to learn. So again, we have our midge solved. This time we've got one wing oriented in the front and the other wing misoriented opposite it in the back. And for this case, as you could probably guess, we can just do F2, R wide prime, F2, R wide. And this case does have a mirror. We've got this time this wing is here instead of here, and then the other one again is misoriented in the back. And this time we can just do F2, L wide, F2, L wide prime. And if you like, you can also think of that case as an F2 setup to my favorite trigger, the 3R wide U2 3R wide prime trigger. And again, this is nearly half the length of your alternative option, which would be something like inserting this wing with R wide U2 R wide prime to flip this one and then inserting that. But again, that one uses lefty and righty moves and is almost twice as long, so I don't think it's worth it. Now, as you will have noticed, for all of the cases so far, I've started by regripping at least one of my thumbs to the bottom layer. Now, this isn't ideal. It obviously makes it a lot easier to execute. However, if you can avoid the regrips, then it's best to do so, and there is a really nice way to avoid the regrips. So this stemmed from, on 3x3, I remember once seeing a variation for the 10-move optimal JA perm. Now, the AUG normally that I use goes like that. And again, I start with my thumb on the bottom to do that AUG, like this. But I've seen variations where people firstly do an L move, or if you prefer to think about it, an R wide move, like that. Because that is the equivalent of moving your thumb to the bottom layer. And if you notice, because all these pieces are already solved, and there's no AUF, it doesn't affect the rest of these unsolved pieces. So the AUG now goes like that. And that adds 2 moves, but it completely removes one or both of the regrips. So I think that's a really nice way of doing it. And we can apply that to this case. So obviously we're only looking at solving 2 pieces here, so we've got a lot of freedom. So you can do, at the start, an L move, or if you prefer to think about it, a 4R wide, like that. And now we've got both of our thumbs exactly where we need them to be. So then this case becomes 4R wide, R wide prime, U2, R wide, U2, 4R wide prime. And that can be done really quickly. Now, this does add, as I said before, 2 moves to each solution, so it turns from a 4-mover into a 6-mover, but it completely eliminates both the regrips, the starting regrip and the ending regrip, and it's still 2 moves shorter than the alternative solution for this case, so I think this could really be worth it. And of course, the same thing applies for the inverse. So again, we've got our midge solved, we've got one wing oriented here, and the other wing misoriented opposite it. So instead of regripping to do this F2 move, what we can do instead is a 4R wide, and then we can just do U2, R wide prime, U2, R wide, 4R wide prime. Now for the mirror of this case, it is slightly different, so it's important to recognize here, obviously we've got our midge solved still, but this time the left wing, the one that needs to go here, this is the one that's oriented in the U layer, and the other wing is misoriented in the back, like this. Now we can't do 4R wide prime here, because we're using lefty moves to solve these pieces. So all we need to do instead is a 4L wide prime, just like that. Or you can also think about it as an R prime. So then this case, with this piece and this piece, becomes 4L wide prime, U2, L wide, U2, L wide prime, 4L wide. Now, another variation of this trick is doing the alg twice. So there are a few cases that you can apply this to. The first of which is when, again, we have our midge solved. This time we've got our wing flipped. The left wing that's meant to go here is flipped. And then our other wing is oriented in the U layer. And so what we can do here is we can put this wing in the back like this, so that this and this wing are both in the same slice. And then what we can do is R wide prime F2, R wide F2, and that sets up to this case. So we can just do R wide prime F2, R wide F2 all over again. And of course, if you want to avoid the regrips, you can do 4R wide first, and then it becomes R wide prime, U2, R wide, U2, R wide prime, U2, R wide, U2, and then end with 4R wide prime. And of course, you can also do the inverse twice. That also works. So the case that that solves is this, where this time it's the right wing that's flipped, so this one needs to go here, and the left wing, which is oriented in the U layer. And for this time, we want to have the oriented wing in the front, like this, so they're on that sort of diagonal, and we can just do F2, R wide prime, F2, R wide. And again, as you can see, we're now set up to this case, where we just do F2, R wide prime, F2, R wide again. And once again, you can eliminate the regrips by doing a 4R wide at the start. So you can do 4R wide, U2, R wide prime, U2, R wide, U2, R wide prime, U2, R wide, 4R wide prime. Another extension is for this case, where we've got this time our left wing is solved, the other wing is misoriented in the U layer, and the midge is oriented in the same slot. And the way we can solve this is with R wide prime, F2, R wide, F2, R wide prime, F2, R wide. And again, of course, you can start with the 4R wide at the start to eliminate the regrip. And this trick can obviously also be applied to 6x6 and 7x7. I'm not going to show them because it mainly just affects the wings, and it's exactly the same as I've just shown you on 5x5. But yeah, overall, this is a really useful tool to have, as it can come in handy for a few different cases that are otherwise mediocre or quite bad, and does save a bit of time. And you can either treat it as a 4-mover, which is really, really efficient, or you can treat it as a 6-mover and eliminate the regrips, and it's still really, really fast. But yeah, as I said earlier on, the key to this trick is, again, being able to double flick with both your left and your right hand. That'll definitely help you in execution, and so I'd recommend learning that before you try to implement this trick. So yeah, that's it for this one. Hope that helped a lot, and thanks a lot for watching.